Seriously, is this bring your grandpa to work day? The question, sharp and laced with derision, cut through the oppressive afternoon heat. Airman Anderson leaned out from the guard shack, his posture a study in practiced arrogance. He gestured with a contemptuous flick of his wrist toward the simple laminated card Glenn Holmes held in his steady, age-spotted hand. Glenn, a man whose 80 years were etched into the lines around his calm, clear eyes, said nothing. He stood on the pedestrian walkway leading to the main gate of Screeched Air Force Base, a lone figure against the shimmering asphalt in the stark, unforgiving landscape of the Nevada desert. The sun beat down, reflecting off the polished insignia on Anderson's uniform and the mirrored sunglasses of his partner, Sergeant Evans, who approached with a slow, deliberate swagger. Evans was the senior man, the one who set the tone, and the tone he had set was one of bored hostility. "Let me see that," Evans demanded, his voice flat. He snatched the badge from Glenn's hand. "Civilian," he grunted, reading the plain black text under the official seal. "What's this even for? Access to the rec center, old-timer?" The two guards stood over Glenn Holmes, a palpable wall of youthful authority and disdain. Glenn was on foot, a deliberate choice, preferring the slow, rhythmic pace of walking to the sterile confines of a car. He had come for the annual memorial dedication, a quiet pilgrimage he made every year. He wore simple khaki trousers and a light blue polo shirt, clothes that spoke of retirement and peace, not of the storms he had weathered. His only adornment was the badge, clipped to his shirt pocket, an object so unassuming it seemed to invite mockery. Sergeant Evans, a man who equated authority with volume, held the badge between his thumb and forefinger as if it were a soiled piece of trash. "Sir, I'm going to need to see some real identification, driver's license, military ID, something that tells me who you are and what you're doing trying to walk onto a secure military installation." The use of the word "sir" was a formality stripped of all respect. Glenn met his gaze, his expression unchanging. He reached into his back pocket and produced a worn leather wallet, extracting his state-issued driver's license. He handed it over. Evans took it, his eyes flicking from the photo to Glenn's face and back again. "Glenn Holmes, born 1945. You've seen a few summers, haven't you, Glenn?" Airman Anderson snickered. "Maybe he's lost, Sarge, looking for the bingo hall." The line of cars waiting to enter the base was beginning to lengthen. A horn blared impatiently in the distance. The heat was relentless, a physical presence that amplified the growing tension at the gate. Evans seemed to feed on it, his contempt solidifying into a more aggressive posture. He held up Glenn's simple badge again. "This civilian badge is a joke. I can make something that looks more official on my home computer. What's it supposed to be for? Special access to the shuffleboard court." Glenn's voice, when he finally spoke, was quiet and even, a stark contrast to the guard's abrasive tones. "It was issued to me. It serves its purpose." "Its purpose," Evans scoffed. "And what purpose is that? Getting you a discount at the commissary? Look, old man, this is a restricted area. We're responsible for the security of this entire base. We've got active drone operations here, advanced technology and thousands of personnel. You can't just wander in off the street with a laminated card and expect us to roll out the red carpet." He tapped the badge against his palm, the rhythmic sound a small insulting punctuation in the heavy air. "For all I know, you're a protester, or a spy, or just a confused old man who doesn't know where he is." The accusation hung in the air, ugly and sharp. Glenn's calm was a fortress. He had faced down men with far more malice in their hearts than this puffed-up sergeant. He had seen the very worst of humanity, and the very best. This was just noise. But it was persistent, grating noise. The small crowd was growing. A few drivers, their windows down, were now watching the exchange with open curiosity. The humiliation was becoming a public spectacle. "I have an appointment," Glenn stated simply, his patience a deep, unrippled pool. "An appointment," Evans repeated, drawing the words out with theatrical disbelief. "With who?" "The base historian. You want to tell him some war stories?" He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "We get a lot of guys like you. Men who want to relive the glory days. But the world's moved on. The military's moved on. Your time is over. Now, unless you have a valid, current military-issued ID that grants you access to this base, I'm going to have to ask you to turn around and walk away." Glenn did not move. He simply stood there, a silent testament to a history the young guards could not possibly comprehend. His stillness seemed to infuriate Evans more than any argument could have. The sergeant's face was flushed, a mixture of the desert heat and his own rising anger. He felt his authority being challenged, not by defiance but by a quiet dignity he couldn't penetrate. He decided to escalate, to force a reaction, to break the old man's infuriating composure. As Sergeant Evans held the badge up to the light, sneering at its simplicity, the glare off the plastic laminate seemed to trigger something deep within Glenn's memory. The flat, featureless desert of Nevada dissolved, replaced for a heartbeat by the choking dust and swirling chaos of a different desert, half a world away. It was the shriek of a helicopter's rotors, the frantic, desperate sound of a machine fighting to stay alive. The air was thick with smoke and the metallic taste of fear. A younger Glenn, his face grimed with sweat and dirt, was kneeling. Beside him, a man lay on a stretcher, his uniform soaked in blood. The man was gasping, his eyes wide with shock. He was a general, a man who commanded thousands, now as helpless as a child. Around them, chaos reigned. Shouts, explosions, the percussive rhythm of gunfire. In the midst of it all, another man, a younger, grim-faced officer, had leaned in, his voice urgent and strained above the din. He wasn't pinning a medal on Glenn's chest. There was no ceremony, no pomp. He was pressing a freshly made, crudely laminated card into Glenn's hand. "You get whatever you need," the officer had yelled over the rotor wash. "Anywhere, anytime, that's his direct order. You saved him. You saved all of us." The memory was a flash of pure sensory overload, the smell of aviation fuel, the sting of sand in his eyes, the immense weight of the general's life in his hands. It was not a memory of glory, but of grim, bloody necessity. It was the birth of the badge, an object forged not in a factory, but in the crucible of combat. The vision vanished as quickly as it came. Glenn was back at the gate, the Nevada sun beating down on his head. Sergeant Evans was still talking, his words a meaningless drone. The past was a ghost, a secret history locked behind Glenn's calm gaze, a history this arrogant young guard was unwittingly mocking with every word. Stuck in the third car back from the gate was Master Sergeant Cole. He was on his way to a logistics meeting he was already late for, and his initial reaction was pure, unadulterated annoyance. He leaned on his horn, a short, sharp blast that was ignored by the guards. He muttered a curse under his breath, craning his neck to see what the holdup was. He saw the two security airmen posturing in front of a single old man on foot. It was a pathetic display of power, and Cole, a man with 25 years of service, recognized it instantly. He had seen countless young NCOs like Evans, men who mistook their stripes for genuine authority and their rulebooks for wisdom. Cole was about to write it off as just another Monday until he saw the object at the center of the dispute. Even from a distance he could see the simple laminated badge in Sergeant Evans's hand. He had heard whispers about such an object, stories that were told in hushed tones in enlisted clubs and NCO lounges. They were the kinds of stories that blurred the line between fact and legend. Tales of a special civilian classification granted for acts of valor so extreme, so far outside the normal channels of recognition, that they required a unique, permanent status. He had always dismissed them as barracks myths. But then he saw the old man's face, his posture, his unyielding calm in the face of such blatant disrespect. And he saw the badge again, plain and unassuming. A cold knot of dread formed in Cole's stomach. What if the legends were true? His training, his instincts, everything he had learned over a quarter-century of service, screamed at him that this was not a situation to be handled with a car horn. This was something far more serious. He reached for his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. He didn't call the front gate. That would be useless. He scrolled through his contacts to a number he rarely used, a direct line to the administrative office of the base command chief. He knew he was taking a risk, bypassing the entire chain of command, but he also knew that if his hunch was right, the fallout from this roadside drama could be catastrophic. The phone was answered on the second ring. "Command Chief's office. This is Airman First Class Peters. This is Master Sergeant Cole," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I'm at the main gate. There's a situation. Security forces are detaining an elderly civilian. I need you to run a name for the chief immediately." He spelled out the name slowly and clearly. "Glennholmes. "Sir, is this an emergency?" the airman asked, his voice betraying a hint of confusion. "Just run the name," Cole insisted, "and tell the chief this man is carrying a simple laminated civilian badge. That's it. Just tell him that." Cole watched as Sergeant Evans gestured dismissively, forcing Glenn to step back from the gate. The master sergeant felt a surge of anger. He had seen enough. He knew what he had to do. "Patch me through to the general's aide now." The request was so out of the ordinary that the airman on the other end of the line was momentarily stunned into silence. Patching an NCO stuck in traffic directly to the office of the base's commanding general was a breach of protocol of the highest order. But there was a quality in Master Sergeant Cole's voice, a mixture of absolute certainty and barely controlled urgency, that cut through the bureaucratic red tape. The call was transferred. In a sprawling wood-paneled office in the base headquarters, Lieutenant Colonel Richards, the aide-de-camp to General Marcus Thorne, answered the phone with an air of weary efficiency. He listened for less than 10 seconds, his posture straightening with every word. Master Sergeant Cole spoke. The casual demeanor vanished, replaced by a mask of intense concentration. He scribbled a name and a description on a notepad. "Hold," he said, his voice clipped. He stood, walked swiftly across the plush carpet, and entered the general's inner office without knocking. General Thorne, a man whose stern features looked as if they had been carved from granite, looked up from a stack of reports, his annoyance plain. "Richards, what is it?" "I'm in the middle of, sir," Richards interrupted, something he had not done in his 3 years as the general's aide. "A situation at the main gate. A civilian, an elderly man, is being detained by security. His name is Glenn Holmes." The name hit the general like a physical blow. The pen in his hand clattered onto the polished surface of his desk. His face, a moment before a mask of impatience, went pale. He stood up slowly, his eyes locked on his aide. "Glenn Holmes, are you certain?" "That's the name I was given, sir. And one other detail. The man is carrying a simple laminated civilian badge. It's the reason he's being detained. The guards think it's a fake." General Thorne stared at his aide, but his gaze was distant, looking back across decades. He saw a dusty, chaotic airfield, heard the scream of incoming mortars, and felt the searing pain in his own leg. He saw a quiet civilian engineer, a man with no obligation to be there, running toward the danger, not away from it. He saw Glenn Holmes. "Get me the chief of security." The general's voice was a low growl filled with a cold fury that made Lieutenant Colonel Richards flinch. "Get the base commander. Tell them to meet me at the main gate. Now, and get my convoy ready. We are leaving this second." He was already moving, grabbing his formal service hat from its stand, his movements precise and filled with a terrible contained energy. The base was about to learn a lesson in history and humility.